We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
President Trump recently did an executive order to help strengthen and reinforce our power grids across the United States, and it had to do with this subject of the EMP or super EMP attack potential across the United States. So I decided I'd do a video about this because there's a lot of question marks in some videos I've watched on YouTube that have to do with this. Most are saying speculatory, you cannot use anything except a nuclear device to create an EMP. And yeah, that's true. But the question then becomes, how can anybody, especially a terrorist, get a nuclear device? The United States has been working for the past 40, 50 years to make sure that nuclear material does not get into the hands of terrorists or extortionists. And that's one reason why the United States back in the 90s was working so hard with the Soviets and the Russians, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, you had all this nuclear material all over the place that anybody could get their hands on. So the United States went into a program called Nukes for Watts, which is basically they take the nuclear material, they break it up, and then use it in nuclear power plants to create electricity. And it worked to a certain point. The United States was able to acquire a lot of nuclear material from the Russians. But then in the process, they found out some nuclear material from these facilities that made nuclear weapons and so forth, it disappeared. And they were basically selling it on the black market. Well, now that Putin has reacquired what's left of Russia and he's made it much larger, he has total control over all the nuclear weapons. So that is one reason why you don't see the United States wanting to try working out differences with the Soviets, with the Russians, because of the fact Putin is a former KGB agent himself. He worked in the KGB, and it's an ironic fact that when Obama was the president of the United States, there was this kind of a hidden agenda of mutual cooperation between between Russia and America. If you remember in 2012, he said, just let the re-election get over with, and he said, I'll take care of everything. This is what Obama told Putin in a kind of a non-candid conversation he had. So, in a lot of ways, people are saying that it's more of a conspiracy about the idea of a super EMP attack happening, because I think it's safe to say that all nations on the earth are behind this global government system that Obama pushed for the 8 years he was president. And now you have them totally and constantly attacking Donald Trump because he stands for what is the last freedom we have as Americans for our country. That he's fighting to keep us as a sovereign, independent nation that does not get sucked into this new world order that Obama's pushing and still is pushing. So one of the theories, is what I call it a theory about the EMP attack, would be that we know from evidence that's been collected that the Russians have hacked into our power grid all over the United States. Now, they didn't say anything about Texas because they have their own power grid, but they have seen indications that the Russians have been able to hack into certain power grids. And what this means is that there isn't potential of EMP being used as much as it is the Russians hacking into these grids and then potentially putting a virus on those grids and shut the power off, which means you would have to recalibrate and reconfigure all the computer systems in the world, or at least in the United States, but there would be no actual electromagnetic pulse hitting the power grids because the Russians have basically used malware or some virus to attack those computer systems and destroy them. And to get back to what really most are thinking is going to happen is there's the potential that the Chinese, the Russians, who do have nuclear weapons, would use it at 30 kilometers above the Earth, and that once that EMP was actually detonated, the bomb would never be detected because it's too far into space for it to have affected anybody. There's no radiation, no fallout, but the EMP would travel thousands, millions of miles in every direction, and that's what they think would then cause an electromagnetic pulse all over America, and that would affect Canada because they use some of our power grids. And once that happens, every electronic device, from your car to your telephone to television to everything, is just totally fried by the EMP. Then there is really nothing after that. Now, I found this really fascinating that when I watched all these videos, nobody ever brought up two films that dealt with this subject as far back as 1997. They did a sequel to Escape from New York with Kurt Russell. It was called Escape from Los Angeles. The storyline is they had developed a series of satellites around the world that could potentially create an electromagnetic pulse, but it was the intention they would use it against a foreign country to wipe out their power systems and take over. And Kurt Russell was sent in, Snake Plissken, to find the president's daughter and bring her out before a terrorist detonated this satellite system that would totally destroy all the power grids of the world. Well, Snake Plissken, he thought he had been infected, and he told Cliff Robertson and all the rest of them, if I get back from this horror situation, he says, I'm going to make you regret it. So when he came back, he detonated the EMP in all the satellites, and it did wipe everything out. It destroyed all the power systems. So this ain't no some fantasy. It's not a science fiction subject. It's been around for more than 20 years that an EMP could do this. Now, the interesting part of what happened in Escape from Los Angeles is that they didn't use nuclear weapons to perpetrate this attack against the world. They used satellites. Now, I ask you, if we know that over the past 40 years we've found crop circles, and crop circles are a definitive evidence of them using satellite technology and lasers to burn crop circles because it's so intricately detailed when they make those patterns. Who's to say that those same satellites don't have the ability to transmit an electromagnetic pulse directly into the atmosphere and fry everything in the world? They're not going to just attack America. They could attack other nations like North Korea, Russia, China. If that technology exists, then what President Trump just did with an executive order is basically to kind of like calm people's nerves down. But who can say there isn't already technology in those satellites that we all know about, GPS and all the rest, that they're using that technology right now against the United States. Maybe they're going to blackmail us as Americans at some time in the future, that if we don't conform to the New World Order that's being perpetrated, they'll use the EMP effect to fry everything in America. But it wouldn't affect other countries. So in other words, if all of it's a part of the New World Order now, the global government, you could have all the other countries that are already communist, like China, North Korea, Russia, Cuba, to come back in after they totally eradicated everything in this country and just take over. Bring back the infrastructure, bring back the power grids, bring back vehicles and other things to recreate America again, but it's going to be in the communist viewpoint, or its communist mirror of what was America, which was freedom. And people will say, well, yeah, but there's going to be a lot of people left. Well, in one video I saw, and it was by Hedgehog, the guy that was speaking said this: within 1 year after using the EMP effect, 90% of the population of that country, in this case America, would die. Not only from starvation, because there's no water, there's no food production, no way to keep warm except fire. There'd be uncontrollable diseases. The video also stated this, that there is no one area of America that has more than 30 days worth of food supplies. We depend that much on what farmers grow and what we get to keep food on the table, keep it in the supermarkets. After 30 days, there'd be no more supplies. And the only people who probably would even last 6 months are what's called preppies. Those who they've already pretty much determined that they have to make preparations with rations, water filtration from whatever they could get, because once electricity's gone, there's no refrigeration, there's nothing to keep food preserved or even to make any more. So instead of it being a nuclear war, the potential is they'll use an EMP effect and eradicate everything that makes up our infrastructure in America. But then if they can centralize it to just America, then not all of Canada will be affected by a power grid failure, because I'm sure they have some areas of the Canadian territories north of the border with the United States that probably have their own power grids, so they could survive. So they would just sort of like say, all those at the border with Canada and the United States, you got to move north to get into a more safer area where there's a power grid that wasn't affected. Is that more of a coincidence or conjecture or even a conspiracy? I just kind of feel like I wanted to bring these things up to make you aware of the fact that there's so much more going on to the idea of an electromagnetic pulse attack, that it's probably a part of what Obama and what the Democratic Communist Socialists are doing, creating more and more chaos, more anarchy, more capitulation to accept whatever Obama keeps telling people and was telling people when he was president of what he expects. If you want utopia, you have to do what I tell you to do. You got to live the way I tell you to, and that's what he's been doing ever since. And I say in a lot of ways, President Trump, though he's trying to do what's right, in a lot of ways he acts sometimes like a puppet, like he's being He's being controlled in certain instances. You know, you got the media constantly doing what Obama says, which is to put Trump down, condemn him, create more farces, more lies, more false news all the time. It happens every day. And then when you hear him say, like, I'm not going to do this because I've got other things going on, like his health care. He said, I've got a plan in place. I'm going to do it. I'm going to work it. Then he says, well, I got to put that off because of something else that comes up. That kind of implies somebody's pulling him, pulling his strings, you know, making him look like a puppet sometimes. And I say it's Obama. Because when Trump was elected as president, does anybody remember how long did Obama stay in the White House with Trump on that day that he was going to take over, when he was actually going after the inauguration? He stayed in the White House with Obama for 30 minutes. That's the longest it's ever been for a president-elect to stay with the actual ongoing or present president who was in the White House. So in 30 minutes, Obama could have told him all this stuff. Well, this is what's going to happen next. This is what you're going to go through thereafter. And you know, he probably told him, expect there to be an EMP attack or something else. Who knows what Obama told him during the time he was in that 30-minute interview time with Trump. He could have told him anything. And when he says to everybody, I've got to organize a way to reinforce our power grids, our infrastructure for the potential of an EMP attack, that means to me, he's saying long term, this is what Obama already said is going to happen, because he's actually the one who's doing it. He's perpetrating it. So these are things you should think about. Who really is behind all these things? Why are they bringing up other things that nobody else even thought about? EMP attack. You know, the constant harassment against the Attorney General Barr about releasing Mueller's report. I give you a hint why that's happening. The Democrats are so lean on getting more lies perpetrated that they have to find some other way of bringing up lies again. So they want the whole report released so that they can look in Mueller's overall conclusions and make up another lie to make it look like Trump was in collusion with Russia, or that he was deliberately in violation of of justice. In other words, that he was obstruction of justice one way or the other. They got to keep making these lies. That's why they keep saying, we got to have the report. We got to have the report. Because they're not going to find anything, but what they want to do is to create the illusion that there is a lie so that they can just keep on and on and on attacking President Trump. That's what it's all about. That's their goal long term, is try to find a way to impeach Trump out so that they can get either Obama himself back in there or somebody like Booker who will continue what Obama started, and that's the New World Order. That is socialism and communism, and they're the same thing. And then maybe we might escape thereafter the potential of an attack with an EMP. But again, if they can centralize that attack to just America and nowhere else, you cannot say there's no way they could rebuild the infrastructure. Because other nations in the world, Korea is where we get all of our power grids anyway, they could bring in a truckload, because guess what? The Democrats prove over and over, they got an innumerable amount of millions, trillions of dollars that they can use. That's what they've been doing ever since Trump was elected. Trying to get other politicians in office who can help instigate communism and socialism, help strengthen and enforce the idea of sanctuary cities, which is to let the Mexicans come here and kill anyone they want to and not stop until the chaotic scenario happens whereby martial law has to be instigated. Therefore, the whole country would become a sanctuary, because then the communists would be able to take over everything else. And the idea it's a conspiracy, I have to say now, I think I've shown you that Obama is behind a lot of what we're seeing. But yet, you don't see his ugly face out there in front of the camera doing these things, because that's what the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to he's going to slither his way through everything and do it without anybody even knowing he's there. And then when he's ready to show his face to the world, he's going to come out and say, here I am your Messiah, I'm your hope for the world and for the future. And that's what he's going to do. That's what Obama is still doing right now. He's creating more and more things that create the new world order, the global government that he said was already here. Well, it's here because he's proven what he's been doing ever since he was president of this country. And he's still doing it every day in the background. Before I end this video, I want to bring up one other movie. It was called The Eraser. The Eraser is sort of like my contention, what I said, that they would use satellites and centrally hit one part of the world, in this case America, with an EMP. You would not have to use a nuclear weapon to do that. In Eraser, Bronny Arnold Schwarzenegger is what I call him, he was able to get his hands on what basically is an EMP gun. And what it did is, when you shot it, it projected an electromagnetic pulse straight at whatever you were shooting at. In the case of a human being, it would just totally incinerate your whole body, because that's electricity and everything else going through you. And so they projected that in the film, that any and every place he shot it, if he shot it at a human, it just went, and that was it. This is, in itself, it is science fiction. I don't think there is such a thing as an EMP gun, but I believe there is probably already in those satellites that are orbiting around Earth a device or a series of devices that, when you combine them as a whole ring around the Earth, it could generate an electromagnetic pulse that would fry everything. And because the government can use these same satellites to create crop circles, it means they can centralize that energy to one place. That's how defined they have it. It's not just like a massive burst and then it just goes everywhere and they think or hope that it's not going to hit other places on the planet. They can do that to one country. Maybe that's what they did in Venezuela. You've got the dictator himself, who's an actual reflection of Barack Obama, and they've had now 2 power grid failures that have lasted a week. What they're doing is they're saying, we can wipe your whole system out if we want to. We're just making it plain to the Venezuelans that communism and globalism is here, and you can't fight against it. So they just use the EMP in a small fraction of the power, wipe out the power grid for a week at a time, bring it back up again. They say, okay, you don't give in, we're going to do it again. They've done it now twice. That ain't coincidence. So I hope and pray all of you will look at what's going on, make your own assumptions, but don't just totally close your mind, because too many people in America have already done that because of one reason. Barack Obama legalized marijuana. And when you don't have a full, clear mind because you're on drugs and narcotics and heroin and all the rest, it's so much easier for him to manipulate you, to control what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And that's what he's doing to you right now. Those who use CBD oil, that's only the beginning of what he'll do. He'll keep increasing that dosage if you're getting it through a prescription, which everybody has to have one, apparently. Before you know it, you're going to be so high, you'll sign your name on a death certificate. If he told you, you're no good to me anymore, sign this, and you would sign it. You'd sign your life away to Obama. A lot of them did, even when he was president of the United States. So I'd say get off drugs, clear your mind, and realize Satan and Obama himself are behind these attacks. They're behind the fake news, the lies. Trump is the only man that's smart enough to see what Obama's been doing. But in a lot of ways, if the Democrats control Republicans, and they have since Obama left office, it means he's still controlling even Trump himself. And that's why a lot of times, like I've been saying earlier, he acts like a puppet. You know, on strings. It's like somebody else is controlling what Trump does. Not always, but in some instances, it's like Trump is probably being told by Obama, well, you're getting too much done here. We can't let that happen, so stop it. You know, stop that part of whatever you're trying to do. And then Trump gives in. But if you notice, no Republican in the Senate, in the Congress, in the House of Representatives, none of them have ever had individual powers to work together as Republicans to defeat the Democrats, to do anything that is been shown that they still have the control over the electoral process, or the part of our government that's supposed to protect our rights as Americans. They've always given in to the Democrats. It all happened in 2009 when Obama passed Obamacare. Nobody remembers this. If you do remember it, you should have been asking yourself, how in the world could you vote for something and not know what's in that bill? And that's what happened. They said, nobody's going home until you sign this bill. They said, you sign it and then we'll tell you later of what's in this bill. And that's why Obamacare passed. Because they were so idiotically stupid, they didn't care what was in it. They just wanted to go home. They wanted to go to sleep, whatever. That's what the communist Democrats do to you. They wane you down. They destroy your energy, destroy your willingness to resist, and boom, they just get you to do anything they want you to. And that's what happened when Obama got Obamacare passed. And that's why people don't want it ever removed as a law, because they say, this is great, this is perfect, it doesn't have any flaws, it's always been perfect. Who cares if you have to be forced to pay for it? Who cares whether there's flaws? Obama is great. That's what I hear everybody say. Obama is great. Obama is great. Democrats, communists, socialists, they're great. It's like, oh boy. You can show a horse where there's water, but you cannot force it to drink from that puddle, from that water, from wherever it is. That's exactly what's happening in America. You can show them the truth, and if they don't want to hear it, they play dumb. They pretend like, you're crazy, you're a conspirator, you're an idiot, you're this, you're that. It's like, fine, believe whatever you want to believe. Because God already said it would happen. He would allow mankind to believe the lie, and thereafter mankind just goes down. And we're there right now in America. So keep your eyes open, watch. Just heard on the news that next week they're going to be talking about a so-called black hole they found within our Milky Way. It's supposed to be somewhere in the Sagittarian star system or something. And like they've been studying this thing for 2 years with several different observatories around the world, and they're going to make the announcement. All it looks like is just this big round circle of light, and in the center is this big black blob, and they're saying that's a black hole. And it's been taking 2 years for them to talk about it, folks. Who knows where Wormwood is? You know, last year they were saying there was an asteroid or something that went around the sun, and it was coming back. Ain't heard them talking about that anymore. You know why? It could be on its way right here to our country, to our planet. And they're not going to ever tell us until the last second. It's like, well, Obama's underground, he's safe, who cares about the rest of them? You know, that's how they look at it. They don't care. So, please, folks, wake up. It's really too late, but I say wake up and realize what the socialists and the communists, what their true plans are. Thank you.
His name is Omran Daknesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust from a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Omran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Omran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Omran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Omran is recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
The images shocked the world. Relentless bombings. Stunned survivors.
على خير بالبحر I'm very